Quest. We have a very special show for you today. We're going to be talking about artificial reefs, and we're going to actually take you to them. This morning we have a lot of people in here helping us with the program. We've got the kids in here, and this week they've been building some models of artificial reefs, and we're going to come back and take a look at exactly what they've done and why they've done it. We've got Tim over on the internet again, and we're going to be looking for questions from you coming in real soon. We've also got Joe underwater today. Uncle Joe is down on an artificial reef, and we will be joining him live underwater in just a few minutes. Tim, how are we going to pull up the area to sending questions today?
Thank you, Patty. As you know, we come into the KidScience homepage listed in back of me here. Scroll right down to ReefQuest, as you've been doing before, and you'll find your Think Time questions. Of course, scroll around a little bit, and we'll have the answers back up here for you.
Okay, we're going down to actually the short answer form.
We're going to go to the short answer form.
What we're looking for today is questions from you guys. We're going to go live to Uncle Joe here in a minute underwater, and as you watch Uncle Joe, think of things you'd like to ask him, and as questions come in here, we're going to be picking out some of them, relaying them to Uncle Joe underwater. So let's see if we can go join Uncle Joe right now down on an artificial reef.
Well, hello, Patty, everybody from ReefQuest. This is Uncle Joe, and man, am I in a current. Boy, this is unbelievable, unbelievable. But I'm going to take you on a dive. We're live underwater at 60 feet, and we're going to see an absolutely incredible artificial reef. So let me move my hand down this chain and point my video camera to this wreck. This is a wreck that is now the artificial reef. It is a YO57, a yard oiler. This ship was actually built in 1944. It was sunk intentionally in 1989 and used as this artificial reef. So we're going to move into this very unusual ship. I want you in the audience, Patty, to look at all the fish around here. Many of these fish are feeding on plankton in the water. They graze upon algae on the ship. So I'm moving my camera in. We'll start to see some of these fish and how they feed. Now, we're going to move into what I call the penthouse, the upper area of this ship, and this then would be the wheelhouse, or the deck area where the captain or the skipper of the ship takes hold. So let me again try to cram through this little cubby hole with my regulator. The current is really pulling my line. Try to make it inside. Yeah, I'm in here. Now you can see the fish in front. Those are what's called yellow and black millseed butterfly fish. Probably one of the most abundant butterfly fish. And what you're looking at now is the steering wheel. This is the steering wheel of the ship. I'll try to grab onto it here. The wooden area then is eroded away, but you can still see the brass spokes, and even the wheel then is the home for many of these encrusting organisms. And Patty, I think I'm attracting a lot more of these lemon butterfly fish and these millseed butterfly fish coming into the area. Let me point my video camera out one of the forward portholes. You see Randy, one of my safety divers, in the background, and all this stuff on the inside of the wreck then is various encrusting animals. We have Dan back there tending the cable on the anchor chain from this very unusual wreck site. But I'm going to go outside now. I can see many of the fish in the area. I'm going to move out to what's called the gangway, the deck gangway. Even the plates of the ship completely encrusted then with various algae and small corals. Let me move backward. This current is just unbelievable. You'll see a lot of other yellow-lined snappers in here. We'll see some trumpet fish and a lot of goatfish that make this artificial reef their full-time residence, Patty. Pointing the video camera downward, this is the deck, the main deck of this yard oiler. It is actually a perfect structure then for many of these animals on this artificial reef. Oh, Patty, this has been an absolutely incredible dive here today.
Okay, we've got a question from Mountain View right now here on the Big Island. Mountain View, who is there?
Blake,
Okay, and Blake, what's your question here?
how do they repair live reefs?
How do they repair live reefs?
Blake, that's a very good question. Until recently, we really haven't repaired many of these reefs, but now scientists are trying to actually transplant corals. If you remember a show not too long ago, Dr. Carlton of the Waikiki Aquarium talked about replanting some of the block corals, which I thought was very fascinating. But what we're trying to do even more is to actually put down these artificial reefs, these structures then which allow material, algae, corals, and then fish to actually accumulate on. You can see Randy ducking into one of the holes on the smokestack. There occasionally is a Moray Eel that lives down there. Randy is trying to see if he can see him. I'm going to move my video camera back on the inside of the wheelhouse, Patty, because what we're going to talk about in the next segment are the encrusting animals, the corals, the algae, and all that actually live on the side of this hull.
And let's go to Naylor Middle School here in Tucson, Arizona. Do you guys have a question about what you're seeing here? Naylor, who is there?
Daniel,
Daniel, what's your question?
how long have they had the ship sunk?
Good question. How long has the ship been down there?
Daniel, the ship was actually retired from the service in 1982, but intentionally sunk in September of 1989. That makes it about 8 years. So it allows scientists to tell the growth rate of these corals and really just how many fish can occupy this area. Now I know that many of the studies down here before had a baseline, had an original idea of the number of fish, but after putting this wreck down, scientists tell us, Daniel, that the fish population increased by over 1,000 times. That's really incredible.
Okay, we're going to leave Uncle Joe here for a few minutes, and we'll come back and see if he can find another place where he can get sheltered in more, and we might be able to actually talk to him there. Modules that are down also close to the ship, and what you're going to see here is some different structures, and take a look at the different life that is there.
Yeah. Now, what you're looking at here is a artificial reef structure which is called a terrace reef. It's primarily made out of concrete and set up on PVC plastic poles, and so it's like a bunch of terraces. That's why the name Terrace Reef. And there are certain fishes that like to live under, there you can see the terraces, that live under the terraces, and then there are other fish that will just hang out. Other species like to stay in the vicinity.
What's that big tall fish we're seeing?
And that big tall fish is a trumpet fish. And here you're seeing another part of another artificial reef. This was unintentional. I believe this was taken in Palau. And this is a World War II fighter plane on the bottom. And look at the coral growth on this thing. But it is an artificial reef.
And when you say it's unintentional, this just was shot down and it's sunk.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right, yeah. So here you are looking at something that's quite old, of historical significance, yet it serves as surfaces for reef organisms to attach. And you see all the corals and the other things there. There are clams and oysters, corals, lots of things on that particular structure. And I believe there'll be some more. This is more unintentional material. Again, materials of opportunity, but these have not been modified specifically as artificial reefs, but they serve the purpose. You can certainly see, again, more coral, some feather duster worms there, just in the corner. We just went by some feather duster worms.
You know, a lot of study and time has gone into developing different structures to
That's
see
right.
what will attract
That's right, yeah.
the most animals here. I think we're back here by the ship again, and
That's right.
look at the amount of fish that we can see around here.
Yeah, well, you know, this 1,000-fold business, I mean, that's a lot of fish. There's a big old Moray Eel.
And he's found a pipe to live in.
That looks like he certainly has, yes.
I think it's actually a cannon that was on that boat and has put himself in there, and nobody's going to fight him for that space, I don't think. Look at the amount of stuff that has grown on this. if this was not down here, we would not have this growth or this habitat, would we?
That habitat would not be there, and that growth would not be there. And so you can see it certainly provides a lot of space for organisms.
And look at all the different kinds of corals. Now, do these corals fight for space?
They certainly do. That's a primary thing for most of our coral reef, our what we call our bottom dwellers, like corals and our algae. There is a strong competition for space. So everything fights for a place to live, to settle, and to be able to grow. And this is why almost all of the space is taken up by something.
Interesting, and like I said, there's a lot of different structure that is there. It looks like a lantern that was hung on the end of this. It's really a neat environment to be down in. It's kind of eerie in some ways. That boat that Joe was on before, I keep waiting for the pirates to come out of there.
Not to be unromantic, that boat was a yard oiler, a Navy yard oiler, but a perfect ship to be used as an artificial reef. But again, look at your coral.
Now, where these are placed, is this apt to get affected by the impact of the waves that you showed us before?
This material, again, this is, I think, in Palau. This is in an area that's probably a fairly low energy area, so you don't have a lot of wave impact. And so that allows things like corals to really take off. And again, it was done unintentionally, so some of this material probably moved around during storms and things. But nevertheless, look at the growth on it. But it's been on the bottom a long time.
Okay, let's talk about these, what do you call them, apartment buildings?
Apartment buildings or
here.
modules.
Okay, we built some apartment buildings here. Now, Dr. Brock, tell me about this one here first a little bit.
This is a neat structure. You guys came up with a neat idea here. Basically, from my perspective, it looks as if you've tried to build something that's rather low, close to the bottom, and it provides shelter for certain kinds of fishes. What sort of fishes do you think might live in a structure like this?
Fishes that rest in the day and to feed on the bottom and then when enemies try to come and eat them, they hide in the tubes.
Okay, good. They're
Very
hiding in
good.
the tubes. They're down. Fish that would like
By
the
day,
bottom.
they rest back in there, use the shelter. By night, probably coming out and feeding on the outside away from that structure.
Okay, now we have a condominium here that's a high-rise.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is very different, isn't
Now,
it?
why would we have a high-rise
A
structure?
high-rise, you know, there are so many organisms that live on our coral reefs. They're so diverse. And there are a bunch of organisms, and you saw some a little while ago with Uncle Joe, those fish up in the water column that were feeding, those butterfly fish on the little particles. Those fish like that are called Planktivores fish, and they very often like to stay close by.
Okay, now tell me,
something
why would
that's
they
tall.
want to stay close by this?
So when one of their enemies comes by, instead of going like deep down to their home, they can go like really fast into like one that's close by them.
Great answer.
Hey,
Great answer.
you're right on the money.
I-
You're a biologist.
Yeah. Something that I want all of you kids out there to think about. This is something that you can build. Now, these guys have created this structure to not go out into the ocean, but to go into a stream or a pond. It's a great artificial reef.
I'll say, yeah.
Made out of PVC pipe and bricks, and it's glued together with special glue. It can go out into a stream. You could find all kinds of different critters. What if we put it in one of our Hawaiian streams? What might we find to come into this?
We'd probably find things like crayfish, and some of our snails, I'm sure, would take up residence there, and some of our fish probably. We have a lot of fish that have come actually from the mainland that are in our streams, and that includes our crayfish. They would probably take up residence here too. Things
Okay.
like swordtails and guppies.
If you were a crayfish, where would you live and why?
Probably in one of the pipes because it's shelter. It's out of the sun.
It's out of the sun and it's shelter, okay? If you were a fish, where would you live?
In the cracks
And why in the cracks?
because so the enemies to the fish won't bother it.
Great.
Okay, and you could
Great.
get in and out and back and forth. You know, if you get stuck in one of those pipes, if you're crayfish, at least you got claws, you can go for
Sure,
it.
yeah.
But again, I encourage all of you to try building something like this. It's an artificial module. It doesn't just have to go into the ocean, but see if you can create something that you could put in a stream and be able to do something. There's a lot of different things that we might find out in the open ocean, and I am one of these critters that we might find out in the open ocean that you really want to look carefully at me today, because I'm not something that you would normally see. I'm really a very minute, tiny little thing, and with a microscope you might be able to see me. But I'm what's called a larva, and I am that stage of an animal it's kind of like the baby stage, that infant stage, where I'm not actually an adult, obviously, yet, and I don't actually know what I'm going to be when I grow up. I live in the water, I float through the water, and as you can see, I cannot be seen because these jellyfish are not actually finding me here. They would want to eat me, but I am floating through the water. I am fairly transparent or in the color of the water, and I really don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. But I think I'd like to go to Uncle Joe right now, see if Uncle Joe can tell me what I'm going to be. I'm going to die if I don't find that artificial reef that he's on that I can attach myself to. So Uncle Joe, are you there? And tell me, what am I going to be when I grow up?
Well, Patty, I'm going to try to show you exactly what you are going to be when you grow up. So in order to do that, let me take you back inside and point to your relative. So let's go past this current here, as you can see, is whistling down. We're going to move inside the deck house, and as I point my video camera again past this ship's wheel that we had seen earlier, I'm going to go up forward and move the camera up along the top of the deck walls and point out maybe what you can be. And that could be possibly one of these dainty, white, fluffy octocorals. Now this is kind of a soft coral. It has 8 tentacles onto it. It kind of whisks back and forth very, very gently, but maybe there's a better animal for you. I see up here, I'm going to try to move my hand in it. You can see it's kind of orange. Let me point to it right now. This is a lace bryozoan, and I think that would appropriately fit you, Patty, in your dainty costume. A lace bryozoan from your larval stage. I think you and the ReefQuest audience will like that pretty well, Patty. But look at how beautiful this upper structure is. And again, none of this would be here. There would be no encrusting animals if it weren't for this artificial reef and structures like this, which is the reason why scientists put these down. The biomass, the number of animals then increases radically. Now this is a coral head that probably a parrotfish tipped the edges off it. We know that the parrotfish come in and actually eat the coral, processing out the algae that's on top of the coral, and then the waste calcium carbonate goes down to the bottom and forms the sand. So let me move again outside. I'm now going to take you forward. This is on the bow end of the ship. Oh, this current's unbelievable. But I'll point the camera then to the front section of the wheelhouse, the pilot station. You can see some of the damselfish moving around here. And also from the front of this, Patty, look at the coral heads. Now, with the ship being down here only 8 years, as Daniel had asked me, we know then these coral heads have to be a little less than that. The portholes, everything like that, still has encrusting animals living into it. Again, some of the soft corals. On the deck here, the green slime that you see, as you referred to it, is an algae. And of course, corals like this particular one is a rice coral because of all those little grains that stick out resembling rice. It looks like somebody's even carved their initials in the side of the ship, as you see here. Many of these other animals then encrust the ship, like sponges and bryozoan and various types of hard and soft corals. So we're at the starboard side now, moving the camera in closely. There's a little damselfish coming up again. So I'll move up into this upper area now.
Okay, we also have a question from Mokalele here on Oahu. Who is there, please?
Ethan Aschenbrenner.
And what's your question?
How long does it take the fish to go to the reef that you sunk the ship?
Well, Ethan, maybe I should invite you down here to count. Let me answer your question in a minute. But first, Randy has brought an unusual animal to show you. He's found this on the bottom in the sand. This is known as a sea cucumber. It's actually a relative of the starfish family. You can see its mouth then that Randy is pointing to. It actually sucks in sand and it filters out the nutrients in the sand, and that's its food. A little bit different, but yet it, like many of the animals, likes to live on this wreck. Now back to your question, Ethan. The fish began actually within hours being attracted to this reef then primarily for protection. Within 3 weeks there was a good population, and now after 8 years it's just absolutely teeming with fish, and also the coral. Now the bubbles that you see here are actually my air then, which was previously trapped inside the top of the pilot house. And through a small hole then, these bubbles keep streaming out. Now that Ethan gives you an idea of the current in the area. Whoa, we whipped over to the side now. You can see those bubbles streaming. Kind of pulls me into the area. But nonetheless, I want to take you and the entire ReefQuest audience to some of these fish then that are actually eating. They are grazing on the algae that is growing on the top of the deck house. This is a filament algae, so it's almost like a grass. And of course they come in with these tiny serrated teeth then, and then pick the algae off, which they in turn use as the food. Well, we have another food chain on this wreck that actually starts with the phytoplankton, the drifting plant plankton, going into the zooplankton, then going into the larger fish. Interesting food chain, Patty.
Now, if we had to talk about a food chain on that ship, what else? You know, we've got the ones the column feeders that eat the stuff out of the water. We've got, that would be plankton, wouldn't it?
Plankton,
Okay,
yeah.
not stuff. We've got those that graze on the green slime. What about some of the other animals? Do they eat each other?
They eat each other, and there are a whole bunch that like to feed on the little critters, if you will, that recruit to the ship, the things that live with the corals, small little crustaceans, things like that. Everything gets eaten.
Also, some of the cushion stars actually eat the corals.
Cushion stars will feed on the corals. You get a tremendous complex food web, if you will.
And that's what makes the healthy habitat.
That's
Now,
Or we have a new section called ReefQuest. So simply click on ReefQuest.
those big letters.
And the big letters, exactly. And we'll go directly into a special page that's been created. From there, we can go take a look at...
A couple different things. You know, as these pictures come up, you can click, I don't think we want to actually go into them, but what he's pointing to here is click into each of these pictures and you're going to learn some things about what's been going on here, some new ideas of things about reefs. But what I really want you to look at is this section called
Student Research Projects.
Okay, and as we click on this, what I would like you to do with this is to take a look at what is going on here. We've got several groups of students in different places around Oahu who are participating in research activities. They are posting their data on here. Okay, over here we have a couple of them listed. Let's go to the one on crabs, and let's pull this one up on crabs. And as we take a look at this, we see who the researchers are, and then we have a question. And the question that these kids went to ask was, what do crabs prefer to eat? And so these kids are trying to figure out what crabs like to eat. And if we come down here, we can see the picture here of this young man is setting out traps. And what these kids have done is put out 4 different traps. And 2 are made out of cotton nets, and 2 are monofilament or nylon nets. And they put different kinds of food in them, and they are evaluating what is going on. Now, what I want you guys to do is to get in here, and week by week, you're going to get their data entries and find out what they learned. Now, here's a picture of what they found in this first time, and I'd like you to figure out how you can pull this data off. Let's say goodbye here, and I think we have one last wave from Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe, bye-bye. Sorry the currents were so strong down there, and let's get him out of the water. Bye-bye to all of you, and we'll be back again.